Hello, and welcome to a very belated, well, not very belated, but a slightly belated Bisexual Visibility Day live from Aim for the Rainbow.
Hi.
I'm hosting, as always, and I'm David Gray Hammond, and I'm here with Charlie Hart and Erin Ekins. Am I?
Ekins.
Ekins,
You got it right first time.
Should have checked beforehand, but that would require some level of forethought. We're going to do some brief audio descriptions. So I'm David Gray Hammond. I'm a mid-30s male presenting Mediterranean person with a beard, a lip ring, a shaved head. I'm wearing sort of thick-rimmed purpley grey glasses with an ear tunnel. I'm sat in my, well, it is normally a very blue room, but it's getting dark now, so all my lights are changing the colours. Sat next to the very rickety bookcase, which, just to update people, did actually fall on me today.
I was going to say that does look like it is actually going to squash you.
It's been a running joke for a while now that it's going to fall on me, and it did finally fall on me today. I sort of shifted my chair to one side, and as you saw, it just
but you weren't live streaming at the time, I take it.
Yeah. No, it would have been more entertaining for people. I think, if I'd been live streaming at the time.
It would have been the natural conclusion of the saga, wouldn't it?
I'm pretty sure Ladbrokes had odds out on when it would happen. So, anyway, Charlie, would you like to give a brief audio description?
Sure. My name's Charlie Hart. I am a 40-something female presenting woman with shoulder-length blonde hair and hazel eyes, wearing a colourful graffiti printed dress with a big countryside mural behind me with a rainbow.
Thank you. And Erin?
Hi, I'm Erin Ekins. I am a white woman in my early 30s with a buzz cut, sort of red glasses, dangly earrings, a leather choker with metal spikes, a rainbow pendant, and a white t-shirt that has the words #celebrate bi women on it in kind of bi colours, so blue and purple and pink, and two women kissing underneath it.
Awesome.
And I'm in front
Where'd you get that? I want one.
I'm in front of 4 bookcases.
None of which have fallen on you, I hope.
Not yet. I've been here 8 months now, and they haven't yet. So we'll see how that goes. And it's Rainbow & Co. I got this T-shirt from, which is an queer autistic run small business.
Oh, sounds
very good. Okay, well, we're here this evening to talk all things bisexuality. Like I said, we are a bit late because this is a Bisexual Visibility Day thing, which was 2 days ago. But I think we're all ADHD here, so it makes sense that we forgot.
I'll probably celebrate ADHD Awareness Month in November as well, don't we?
Yeah. But maybe we should just jump right in. So do we want to talk a bit about when we realized, well, I mean, I'm not bi, I'm pan, but when you two realized you were bi?
Sure.
Do you want to go first, Erin, or shall I?
Yeah, I'm happy. I'll go first. Yeah. So I realized I was bi when I was 16-ish. It was a very exciting process of watching a television show and seeing a bisexual character and going, that's a thing I didn't know you could do. And kind of being introduced to the concept of being attracted to more than one gender, which wasn't something I'd ever been exposed to, just from that character in that TV show. Which obviously led me to Googling things, which led to me going, that's me. I've played around with a few identities over the years. I mainly go by queer now, just because I love the word queer. I love everything about queer, but I still identify as bisexual. I've been very proudly bisexual for 15 years. And yeah, so that's my story. That's where that came from.
Fantastic. And Charlie?
So I'm going to be demonstrating now just how much older I am than Erin, I think. When I was at school, I was always equally drawn to people of any gender. It was always individuals. But I didn't really realise that that wasn't the same for everybody until I was in my teens and people were dating and there were boyfriends and girlfriends. And yeah, there was no visible representation at all at school of anything other than heteronormative relationships. But when I was 16, I watched Bram Stoker's Dracula, and Winona Ryder turned me bi. Yeah. Now I had a conversation with my boyfriend at the time, who was a fair bit older than me. I think I was 16; he was about 25. But he said to me, "Oh, that's called being bisexual. You're watching a film and you're attracted to the female character as well as the male one. You're probably bisexual." I hadn't really thought about it like that. There wasn't Google. I couldn't Google anything in those days. So yeah, it's Winona Ryder's fault, and I still would now. But I just thought it was the same for everyone until then. And I went for a sixth form residential trip to the Lake District when I was about 17, and there we played a game of truth or dare, and people asked about they asked girls if they'd kissed other girls and things like that, and it came out that I was bi. And I kind of expected people to think I was a bit cool and edgy, or to say, "Oh yeah, no big deal, me too." But what I wasn't prepared for is a lot of probing questions and then really feeling othered. I already felt weird and different. I was already picked on for being unfashionable and square. Obviously, then I had no idea I was autistic, but I was already an oddball. So to me, then it was just something that made me feel even odder. Then when I went to university, I joined the LGBT society, and it never occurred to me that there's a community there where people can meet each other and feel different and not all that weird together, rather than just like everyone else or the odd one out. So yeah, it's been a bit of a rocky journey, because I've had times where I haven't been open about being bi because I've feared discrimination and, more likely, just being misunderstood. It's hard to make friends anyway when you're autistic. And I've just found that being bi has made it harder for me to make female friends, because too many women have misinterpreted my intentions towards them because they know I'm bi. But now I'm a out and proud bi role model, and the pride is just growing, and it's a big part of my identity now.
What you said about being cool and edgy, because I think that's something that gets leveled at you a lot. And I'm like, there was no fear that me coming out as bi was going to make me in any way cool or edgy, because I just was fundamentally a massive dweeb. So
I think you're cool.
I was never going to be cool or edgy, and being bi didn't suddenly make people think I was cool or edgy. I was still the nerd who didn't really know how to socialize with people. So
I was always a square, but I had this thing where I thought, bullies that call me square, if I do something that seems daring, they'll realise I'm not a goody two shoes and they'll leave me alone. And how wrong was I? Really glad to see things seem to be a bit different for my daughter's generation, where it does seem to be a bit cool to not be like everybody else.
So obviously Aim for the Rainbow is all about the double rainbow. So we're talking, neurodivergent and queer. So I guess I'm interested in your thoughts on what do we think might be unique about being autistic and bi? And, perhaps, I think, Erin, you might have mentioned you had some statistics on the number of bisexual people in the autistic community. I'd be interested to talk about this a bit.
Yeah, I'm happy to say I have them on a post-it note. I'm desperately well prepared. But it depends what study you look at. Well, I've only got two, but I know there was a study by Cambridge University in 2021 that looked at kind of sexuality and sexual behaviours in autistic people. It's not an unproblematic study. There's a lot about it that really irritates me, but there's some numbers there that we can take. And they found that amongst the kind of the autistic respondents, between sort of 11 and 12% identified as bi, and specifically as bisexual. I think they only asked straight, gay, bisexual, and then there was a big asexual or other category, which is annoying. But so that was between sort of 11 and 12%, which was higher than the non-autistic. I can't remember what the number was for the non-autistic, but it was quite a bit lower. And then I think there was an Autistic Not Weird survey last year in 2022, and that came back that almost 19% of the autistic respondents identified as bi, and that study did include a lot of other sexualities. It wasn't just LGB and everything else. There was a lot more focus. So that was almost 19%, 18.8, I believe. So not an insubstantial number. There's a lot of us around, and I think there's obviously, with being autistic, we have like a unique autistic experience of kind of queerness more generally, particularly in the queer community. And I think being bi, you can sometimes feel a little bit alienated or on the outside of the queer community. That's something that I've definitely felt. And I've also had that double whammy of feeling a bit left out, because but when I say left out, I don't just mean no one wants to be my friend. I mean finding resources that are specific to me is hard. I mean finding a community that I need when I need support is really hard. And I've found something similar being autistic in the queer community as well. So there's also almost that double alienation sometimes. And it was worse when I was younger, because I think I was more vulnerable when I was younger, and I desperately wanted to have a community. But I definitely cope with it. I don't know if it's gotten better, but I definitely cope. I've got a little bit of a thicker skin now I'm a bit older, and I've found some of my people, and I'm a lot more confident in who I am. But yeah, I think I think for me there's that strange kind of double alienation. Two things that alienate you from the straight community.
Yes.
But then I'm also alienated in the queer community as well, for those two reasons rather than the one. So it's not always. I mean, I wouldn't change anything, but it's not always an easy experience.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I was so happy when I met you and read your book, Queerly Autistic. Yeah.
Always a plug.
Yeah.
I'll send you the £5 later.
What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. When I first started going to pride parades and taking part in pride parades, I did wonder whether people would think, what's she doing here? She's in a straight relationship, because I'm female presenting, not gender conforming, but I'm female presenting and married to a man, my second husband, actually. But what I keep reminding people is, bisexuality isn't about who you're currently sleeping with. It's about who you are. It's an internal thing. So I'm really getting to grips with that label now. I like to call myself pansexual as well, though. And the definitions that I use, they both actually apply. So I tend to go for bisexual because I like the colours.
See, I just broadly go for, like, bi and pan probably could both apply to me, but I broadly just go for queer because, well, much like Erin, I like the word queer. I also like the connotations, that idea of queering the normative values. Yeah. Like, for me, being queer isn't just about who I'm sleeping with, it's about actively rebelling against that heteronormativity, which I think is so harmful to a lot of us.
It's a really new concept for me, and being that little bit older than you as well, I think I've been brought up in a generation where queer was still seen as a slur. So I'm a little bit further behind, I think. But I do describe myself as a queer ADHDer.
Yeah. So, what was the question? I had a really good question. Bear with me. I can remember one I was going to ask. I'm interested to discuss this because obviously the statistics you were talking about, Erin, you were talking about the fact that they looked at sort of straight, gay, bisexual, and then broadly other, and they had this 19% for bisexuals. And I was thinking, whilst you were saying it, if they'd have broadened the selections there, and when you think about asexuality, you have to start thinking about the split attraction model, the fact that you can have sexual and romantic attraction as two separate things. And I wonder what your thoughts are here. Do you think perhaps the rate of being bi would be much higher in that study if they included bi-romanticism as well as bisexuality?
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
And vice versa, I think. Like, for instance, I thought for a long time I wouldn't be romantically attracted to somebody the same gender as me. I have had relationships with women, but generally most of my partners have been male, and one or two non-binary as well. But I always thought that I only fall in romantic love with men. And then I realised, just because I've put myself in that situation and that's the way that my life's panned out, it doesn't mean that I should actually rule it out. Who knows what would happen? But I always felt sexually attracted to any gender, but couldn't see myself settling down with anyone other than a man.
Yeah.
God knows why. But I felt really awkward around women for a lot of my life, and I think a lot of that is to do with being autistic. So it's not being into hair and makeup and fashion and a lot of other things that people talk about on girls' nights out and things. I don't even like the concept of a girls' night out. I've always been one of the lads. I've always been a tomboy, so I have been awkward around women. And being bisexual's made that even more awkward, but I think it comes from being autistic.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking. I'm firmly on kind of that when you talk about that, on board with that whole thing of it's not who you're currently dating. And speaking as someone who is perpetually single at this point and quite happy to be perpetually single. We'll see what happens in the future, but I'm like, you know what, I'm chilling, it's fine. I think there's and I've kind of played around with the split attraction model and thought about it in terms of my own experiences, and I've and kind of realized, I find women very, very sexually attractive. I'm like, well, I watch The Mummy and I'm like, well, all of these people are gorgeous. What am I? I am that meme and that trope of, oh, when I was a kid, I was attracted to everybody in The Mummy. Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, that was me with Bram Stoker's Dracula.
Oh, but, well, that's a good choice.
If I had to, I mean, it's a spectrum, and if I had to express a preference, I would probably say that I'm more sexually attracted to women and non-binary people than I am to men. No. But I've ended up married to two men somehow.
You see, for me,
not at the same time.
For me, one of the things that this is my own sort of personal opinion, but I find it odd sometimes that we use sexuality as an identifier, because to me, it's like you're attracted to who you're attracted to. You get into relationships with whoever you do. You can be in a heterosexual relationship. You can be in a homosexual relationship. You could be in a polyamorous bisexual relationship. So for me, sexuality is more something I do rather than something I am. Mm-hmm. If that makes sense. I think that's why I like the word queer, because I don't fully identify with a particular sexuality. That sexuality is what I'm doing in the relationship I'm in, or not in, as the case may be.
I think that's a natural progression from stepping back from the gender binary, isn't it? You take away the concept of binary gender and write it off as a social construct, then it's just nonsense, isn't it? It's whoever you're attracted to.
Yeah, and I think there's this common misconception that heterosexuality is somehow the default.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if it was something that was kind of more accepted and more open, I do think more people would identify as kind of some flavour of queer, or as some flavour of sort of kind of M-spec, that is kind of multi-gender attraction spectrum, which includes like bi and pan, and anything that involves being attracted to more than one gender. And I wouldn't be surprised if there was, if more, and as we go on, whether more people will identify that way and or will be open to that, as we hopefully, well, I say I'm making assumptions that we're going to keep going in the right direction. I'm not fully confident that we're going to at the moment. It's a bit of dicey. But if we were to continue in that direction, I would think there would be more people. And I came out as bi at 16, and my understanding of what being bi is has completely shifted over the years, because my my initial identification as bi when I was 16, I had no concept of the idea that there was anything other than binary gender. I was like, oh, it's men and women, and that's who I'm attracted to, and there we go. And as I've got older, obviously I've
Excuse my daughter grabbing her cosplay wig from the desk.
And as I've got older, obviously my understanding of gender has really broadened. Not just generally my understanding of gender, but kind of my own gender and my relationship with my gender has gone in different directions. And from that, my understanding of who I am as a bi person has completely changed, and that's why I now lean more towards queer. But I do still very much identify as bi. I think because it's the one I identified with first, and it still fits because I've looked into it and I've seen, oh, maybe the original definition I had of bi was very much that I'm 16 and this is a very basic definition. And as I've got older, I've got, oh, it's a bit more complex than that.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really kind of interesting journey that I've been on as a queer bi person, and how my understanding and relationship with gender has kind of transformed my understanding of my bisexuality as well.
I'd like to talk a bit about the definition as well, because, yeah, like you, I was 16 and thought, yeah, I fancy boys, I fancy girls too. That makes me bisexual. But then, since discovering about non-binary and gender fluid identities in the trans community, I realised it's not that simple. But if you actually look at the Bi Manifesto and other documents from long ago from that community, it's always said it's regardless of gender.
Mm-hmm.
And more recently, to try and address an issue that people think it's trans exclusionary, which it isn't anyway, they've put 2 or more genders in the definition, which sounds kind of clunky. But I read a definition that said the bi, as in 2 from the Greek etymology, it's because it means the same and different. So I swing both ways, because I'm attracted to people that are the same gender as me, and also people that are different gender from me. So since I found that out, so we're learning all the time, but since I read that definition, I've lent more towards the bisexual label than the pansexual one. But it does equate to pansexual as well. I really don't care what gender people are if I fancy them. It's a physical reaction, almost a chemical reaction maybe, but it doesn't come from working out who they are as a person and what gender they identify with and then saying, oh, I can fancy them or I can not fancy them. It certainly doesn't work like that. So bi and pan for me. But the colours though. My husband is in a Britpop band, and I went to his gig on Saturday, definitely Britpop. and he'd bought some red, white, and blue lights, disco lights, because it's a Britpop band. And the way the colours merged together, it was pink, purple, and blue. So I was super visible on Bisexual Visibility Day with bi lighting and everything.
I think something to say on the definition, as kind of, there's a fluidity around words. There's, you know, we know that there's a fluidity around words, and I think, while I'm very much like, I feel like I could identify as pan, but I've decided to stick with bi. Other people obviously feel differently.
Yeah.
And there's other people for whom that actually the demarcation, that's a long word, Erin, well done, it's very late. The kind of that the difference between bi and pan is actually very important. You know, there's kind of, when we kind of talk about the difference between bi and pan, for some people there isn't in there, you know, but for others it can be that bi means attracted to more than one gender, but not necessarily all genders. So there might be some bi people who identify as bi because they're attracted to more than one, but they don't identify as pan because they aren't attracted to all genders, or gender plays a part in their attraction. It's not regardless of, and then obviously people identify as pan, it's kind of attraction regardless of gender. So I think it can be really you know, it's really interesting that obviously there's a real fluidity of language for individual people, where, you know, I think for me, I you know, bi is my identity, but I feel a real affinity to pan as well. And for other people, it's very much it's that this is actually the difference between the two is very important to me, and this is why I'm one and not the other. And so I think that's
still figuring it out from what you're saying then.
There's individuality.
Gender plays a part in it if I'm saying that I'm generally more attracted to women than to men. But yeah, it just might be that there's more attractive women out there.
And I think it's the difficulty with words, isn't it? There's the, you know, what an identity, and something that I do say in my book is, you know, that what's important is you finding an identity that works for you and defining that identity for how it works for you. Because I mean, if we're going to come up with incredibly strict definitions and say, no, you can only identify as this if you meet these 17 criteria, that's not queerness. That's the antithesis.
That's a right turn off for me.
That's not, that queerness is about getting rid of that. And I think, you know, so everybody's sort of interpretation of their identity and the words around their identity is really important to take into account. It's all very, I'm just very interested by all of it.
No, I'm really learning. I'm still learning from you. I learned from you when I read your book, and I'm still learning. When you think about how similar this debate is as well to whether we talk about being autistic or ADHD or any of those other words to do with neurodevelopmental conditions and also mental health conditions as well. And I choose neurodivergent because I don't think there's a pigeonhole of neurology that sums me up very helpfully. And to me, that's the equivalent of saying that I'm queer.
This is the thing, though, isn't it? Is when we start setting criteria for what you identify as, it becomes identity politics. And you start getting sort of exclusionary thinking and things like that. For me, the reason I tend towards saying I'm pan or more often queer is because, like I said, sort of bisexuality could apply to me because I haven't been attracted to every single gender in the literal sense. But for me, I don't rule out the fact that it could happen. Like, I just assume I just haven't met someone of a particular gender yet that attracts me, because, and this gets into another myth, like, I'm not attracted to every person that exists.
Yeah, speak for yourself. No, I'm not either.
It would be
very tiring if I was.
It's a real issue to me that people think because I'm bi that I'm always trying to get into their pants. It's caused me such trouble over the years. And it's hard enough to win friends and influence people and foster good working relationships when you're autistic. you throw bisexual into the mix, and people misinterpreting your intentions, and it's even harder. And that's why I think it's a multiply marginalized intersection.
I've been in the position where people have assumed that I would be up for something because I'm bisexual, and it's very much been an assumption. And then when you're not up for it, or you're like, no, thank you, I'm fine, I'm going to stay here and have coffee. Yes. There's almost but you're bisexual, you know, like it invalidates you being. I've been in that very weird position of kind of that being the insinuation, and it's very you know, it's and I think that feeds into, you know, not to get bleak and morose about the whole thing, it's you know, I think that really feeds into the quite bad kind of rates of abuse that the bi community faces, particularly by women, but by people of every gender. You know, there's particularly high levels of intimate partner violence, there's particularly high levels of sexual violence, and
I can understand that. And
you look at it, and it's that all of those, because obviously some of it is homophobia, it's that general queer phobia, but there's something that makes it very disproportionate for bi people, and I think the stigma around bi people really feeds into abuse, because we're seen as cheaters, we're seen as, you can't trust us, you have to be careful around us, or you're seen as being up for anything, or your sexuality is an excuse for someone to say, well you wanted this, or, you know. So I think that the kind of the biphobic stereotypes really feed into kind of, it's not just, oh, someone thinks something about me that's not true. Actually, I think it feeds in a really material way to real issues that the bi community faces. And that's really important to,
from my
really
own experience. I definitely agree, because having been bullied at school for being weird and different, autistic without the label really, and square I was called, I was really vulnerable to abuse in my late teens and throughout my 20s really. So I had some quite controlling boyfriends that would see a vulnerability, and then they would get even more controlling, because they would think that I would eventually leave and run off with a woman.
Yeah, and I just wanted to punctuate this point by highlighting this comment from Moats Place the Page. Queer, bi, pansexual does not mean no personal boundaries. And I think that's really important, because
I'd never heard of boundaries at that age, though. I didn't know what consent was. I didn't know what boundaries were. I wasn't taught how to self-advocate.
Yeah. I think the fact that bi people, and I'm going to say kind of bi, and but also generally MSpec, sort of MSpec is a multi-gender, you know, attraction. Generally, kind of bi and other MSpec people, like, this is where kind of the conversation around visibility is really important, because for me, visibility isn't just people know I exist, or hey, you know, I'm sad because people don't think I'm queer enough. And I've talked about this on Twitter. For me, visibility is about, you know, where's my resources and supportive community when I need it? If I'm in a position where I'm vulnerable to abuse, where are the resources specific to me as a bi woman to help me with that? Who's going to help me with that? Or where's my mental health services that are affirming to me as a bi woman? And I think when we talk about invisibility, it gets very much kind of watered down. But the real material impact of invisibility is there are very, very high rates of abuse that we experience. There's very high rates of mental health issues that we experience. There's very high rates of poverty that we experience. And where are the resources that are tailored for us if we are excluded from the queer community in the way that a lot of bi people feel, but they can't go to the straight community because they're not straight. We're not straight. And that's kind of the real material impact of invisibility that I think doesn't get talked about when people talk about bi visibility.
And I think you've also got to consider that if you're autistic and bi, you fall victim of queer phobia in the autistic community because it is there, even if people want to try and ignore it, it is there. But then if you go to queer communities, there's a lot of ableism as well. And so that you are that minority stress is coming at you on multiple facets of your existence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I said, I feel like I'm just plugging my book, but I think that was part of the pitch that I made with when I was writing the book, was that I've found a lot of resources for me being LGBTQIA+, and I found a lot of resources, well, not a lot, but some resources for being an autistic adult or just an autistic person. But what I didn't have was resources and information around where those crossed over. And I needed that because, my experience of being queer is impacted by the fact I'm autistic, and my experience of being autistic is impacted by the fact that I'm queer.
Absolutely.
These are not.
And it's not unusual. You're not talking about something super rare here.
I know, it's so we're such a high percentage of autistic people identify as queer in some way. It was baffling to me that there wasn't much before that. I mean, I'm not saying I'm the first one who did it, and there were people who were doing it on the internet a long time before I was doing it. I was just in the right place at the right time, talking to the right publisher to get a book out on it. But there were people like the Double Rainbow in Texas, I think. That's
Twainbow.
Yeah. That's the one, yeah. That's where I learned about the phrase double rainbow and immediately fell in love.
Me too.
So we've been talking about it in our circles.
So I went Googling looking for this.
You do, don't you?
Yeah, and I found an American charity.
But
and I said to Emma Dalmain, why isn't there one here? And she said, oh, there is. It's not a charity, but we've got Aim for the Rainbow. So
we're getting there.
That's when I got on board. But yeah, there's a lot more we can be doing. And this whole conversation is feeling like a call to action.
And I think, I think it's a call to action. I think it's really important that, we recognize that the bi community is as varied as the autistic community. And not everybody in that community everyone has a voice, but a lot of voices aren't being elevated. And if we could get to a point where we've got a huge diversity of kind of queer autistic voices as part of Aim for the Rainbow, that would kind of be the ultimate goal, I think, and really make sure that we're not only representing a certain subsection of the community.
Yes.
Okay,
I'm in the Birmingham bi community, and most of us are autistic. There's not many neurotypicals, so we all find each other on Facebook, and it's really easy to talk. But when we actually meet up in person, it can be a little bit awkward.
A little bit.
So they do quiet art and board games and things like that.
That's great. I see.
Some of us are gobby though, like me, but I'm not very good at facilitating conversations in bigger groups.
If I was going out, I think that was an issue that I faced at university. Was I was like, right, I'm going to university. There's queer stuff in the city I'm going to. I'm gonna go out and I'm gonna be my best queer self. I'm gonna reinvent myself. And I went to a gay bar, cried, left, never went back. So, and then it was like, well, what do I do now? That was how I envisaged the community. So having space like quiet art and board games, I'm like, oh, more please.
I usually take my rock painting or the little wooden hearts that I paint as well.
Oh, I love that so much. More please.
We need more queer coffee shops. Like I don't drink. Like I don't want to go to a gay bar because I don't like bars and nightclubs. I would like a nice little coffee shop where I can just go and be queer as hell.
There's a couple of those in Birmingham, I think. You'll have to come visit sometime.
Well, I'm in Brighton. We have a few places like that. We need more of them.
I'm in Basildon and we don't. Who's surprised by that? Nobody, not a single person. I will have to. I've got a couple of bi friends up in Birmingham actually, So I will have to come up at some point and see.
Could come to one of our
Yeah,
quiet art by
Love
picnics in the botanical
board
gardens.
games.
It's awesome.
And I think having sober spaces is really important as well, because it's not just people who don't drink because we might have issues with drinking, or we might have issues. I mean, and I think when I say this, people always think I'm judging them for drinking. I would never judge anyone for drinking.
No.
If that's,
I have issues with moderation.
Exactly. No, I have no issues with that. I have, I think having bars as spaces is really important, and those spaces have been so important throughout our history. So they're really important. We just need alternatives, not just for people who have sensory sensitivities or anxiety, or who need a quieter space, but also because we have addiction issues in the queer community. And so, but only having community spaces being places where alcohol is served is exclusionary to people who perhaps can't be around alcohol. So it's having these quiet spaces, not getting rid of the loud spaces, because historically those are so important and lots of people love them. I know I've got a few autistic friends who love gay bars because they're quite sensory seeking. But we need alternatives as well to complement them, I think.
Yeah, and I really want to highlight that, because addiction can be a massive issue for the queer community.
Absolutely.
Like when you think about reasons why people enter into addiction, you're very often thinking about, trauma. And as we've just said, for example, bisexual people, bisexual people are being effectively traumatized by other people because of all the reasons you gave. And then when you're autistic, as you said, Charlie, you've been kind of like awkward, and you thought that it would be edgy and cool being bi, but then actually it wasn't. And like all of these sort of life experiences, they pile up, and then people go, oh, how did they end up addicted to drugs? Or why do they drink themselves to sleep every night? It's like, it's really obvious why this is happening, but no one is addressing it. Like,
and you think that the double whammy of that is that we also have a real issue with addiction as autistic people as well. Autistic people are much more likely to have some sort of addiction, and so when you pair that with queerness without being LGBTQIA+, and I think it's not something that gets addressed a huge amount. And I know people are addressing it, don't worry, but I think it's definitely having quieter spaces, particularly spaces that are dry spaces, is so important for the queer community and for the autistic community and for the queer autistic community. I think more coffee shops, please. More bookshops. I love a bookshop.
I love the picnics at the botanical gardens.
Also, more online spaces, because, for example, I run a Discord server for my Emergent Divergence page, and the thing that people like about it is that it is a safe space to just come and sort of virtually hang out with other autistic people. It would be nice to have those options for people, especially like autistic and queer and bi, whatever, It would be good to have those specific spaces where people can come and not necessarily have to be around other people, but still be around other people, if you know what I mean.
Completely. I think something that I talk about is, a lot of my experience of community has been online. All of my close friends are friends that I made online. Everything I've kind of most experiences I've had around the queer community and the autistic community is online. And obviously, sometimes when I talk about that with younger people, I have to be very sort of, it all has to be caveated, and rightly so, with, you can find really important spaces online, but also be really, really careful. So to have more safe spaces, say like a Discord server that is safe. And I think that's really important for people. I think having curated online spaces that are safe and we can direct people to them and say, we know these are safe, is really, really important. And we need more of that, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel quite emotional now. Yeah. It just, when we talk about this, it just really brings it home to me how multiply marginalized we are, and how many people are lonely and on their own and not getting the support they need.
I think sometimes we become so accustomed to being marginalized that we almost forget we're marginalized, because it just becomes like internalized and normal, doesn't it? And it's like, oh, well, yeah, you know, I'm excluded from everywhere, but isn't everyone? Like,
yeah, because my husband and my kids are here, and they're, you know, they're open-minded and quirky and queer as well. So it's like, yeah, I forget there's people out there struggling unsupported.
I think someone made a really good comment, or made a really good point about a tweet I did about, and I'm still calling them tweets. They're not posts.
Yeah.
Never happening. It's tweets.
Definitely.
The tweet I made around the material impact of invisibility that people weren't taking into account. And someone made a really good point that even though, even just the basic, oh no, they don't think I'm queer enough, that can have a really devastating impact on your mental health. And that is a material impact. And that the loneliness that comes with that, because you don't fit into straight or cis allo het spaces, and then you try and reach out to the queer community and you're excluded or you're made to feel uncomfortable, and the toll that the loneliness that creates makes you vulnerable. And I experienced this at university. I made a friend at university, and I was so desperate for a friend in the community that I clung to this person who liked me, and it actually turned into quite an abusive friendship that actually left some quite deep scars. And it took me a really long time to get out of that. And the fact that I was very vulnerable was because I was lonely, because I felt excluded from the community. That's a very, very real life material impact that these people don't see me as part of. These people don't see me as part of I don't have a community that can actually have. So I think that's having community spaces, even if they're online spaces, even if they're Discord, it's so much more important than gets given credit for, I think. So much more
I could have really done with it at that age.
Yeah, so could I. Something
that really stands out for me is that, like, I get a lot of imposter syndrome trying to access queer spaces. A lot of it comes from the fact that I am het passing. Like, I can pass for heterosexual. I've got a young son with a woman, you know, and so people just assume I'm straight, but I'm not. But because people assume I'm straight, I worry that, you know, as I enter a queer space, are people going to think I'm a heterosexual person infringing upon their queer space? Do I really belong here? Am I going to make people feel unsafe? And inadvertently, I then feel unsafe. And, you know, I think there needs to be more discussion about this thing where people, because I think some people almost make out that it's good to be het passing and that it gives you some privilege, which it does in a sense, because there can be a safety that comes from people not assuming you're queer. But also the imposter syndrome that can come with it can be really harmful to your well-being.
It's a very nuanced conversation to have, because I think, you know, obviously there are bonuses to being het passing, but at the same time, if part of that het passing is you having to repress a part of yourself and being in the closet, that causes damage. I always use as an example my mum's gay. My mum didn't come out until she was 50 years old, and she was in a relationship with my dad for 25 years. And throughout the whole time, she was completely het passing, because she's still relatively het passing, whatever that means these days. But and that provided her with safety, but she was also closeted, and that's so damaging. And I think there's a real nuance to that conversation. I think there's some privilege there, but that privilege, I think it's like the masking conversation, that not everybody can mask, and masking provides us with a level of safety that people who can't mask don't get, and that is a privilege. And but
it comes at a cost.
But it does come at a cost as well. And actually, if we just made it so we didn't have to do that, everything would be great.
Yeah.
So I think I think that the conversation around privilege and passing is I think people either go really hard one way or really hard another, and I think that there's a space in the middle for a lot more nuance in that conversation.
Definitely.
It's just very funny when people go to, oh, you're bi, you're het passing, and it's like, okay, but when I go out with my mum who's gay, and married to a woman, and we go out together, I'm the one that's clocked as queer. So there's layers to this you're not engaging with, okay?
Yeah. So we've covered quite a lot so far. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to discuss this evening?
I can't think of anything unless there's anything in the chat.
Most of the chat has just been people chiming in, sort of agree with us, talk about their own experiences, which I'm not entirely sure it's ethical to pin those to the stream. You know, Bobby is there in the comments, and they have they've mentioned how you know, back in the 80s they were ostracized from straight and gay places, which we've been talking about. So yeah, you know, Bobby is there in person and in spirit, but not in person on this live stream. But you know what? Well, now she's in person on the live stream.
A dislocated wrist or something.
Yes, I hope you're right, Bobby. I was going to say that's such a good point to make, because I think there's this assumption that, you know, the gay and lesbian movement happened and we showed up like 20 years ago, and I'm like, no, mate, we've always, the MSpec people have always been here. I mean, the mother of Pride, you know, one of the women who was one of the founders of Pride, was a bi polyamorous woman. So, you know, I refuse that argument that it was the gay and lesbian movement and then the bisexuals shoved their noses in 20 years ago once all the hard work was done. That's, you're being ahistorical, and I don't like it.
The point I like to make when people say, well, this didn't exist, that didn't exist back then, is, well, you know, Pluto wasn't discovered until the 20th century, but I'm pretty sure it was there the whole time.
Yeah.
Just because people noticed it's there now doesn't mean it wasn't there before. Like, we don't make things exist.
Yeah. They invented autism in the 40s. It didn't exist before then.
But yeah, no, it always makes me laugh. Oh, we didn't have these gay people back in the Second World War, and I'm like, there's me with my phone up looking at like World War II soldiers missing their loved ones who are definitely the same gender as them. Yeah. I'm like, did you just not? You like, we have Google. Just Google it. Like,
this is exactly, and there's a lot of
no
queer
excuse for a bad take anymore.
No, ridiculous. Anyway, yes, thank you for that comment. That made me go, yeah, you know, and I think there's a, sorry to just go on a waffle, but I think there's a really good kind of point there as well, that I've been in a position where I've been in a queer space and people have assumed I'm a lesbian, and I've just let them assume it because it felt safer in that space to let them assume that I was a lesbian, and it didn't feel good. But in that particular space,
different closet.
yeah, it was very weird, because it was like, okay, I don't have privilege that I'm a gay passing, but this feels really weird and I don't like it. So yeah, I thought that was just an interesting.
But this is the thing, isn't it? When you're MSpec, it seems to be a battle between either being het passing or gay passing. No one wants to take you as MSpec.
No.
Like, and that's really frustrating.
Very annoying. And it is, yeah, it does, it's not a good feeling. And I think if that keeps going on, that does impact you and how you view yourself. So having to pretend that you're something that you're not. So yeah, not a fun time.
No. Well, it's we've talked about some pretty heavy duty things.
Yes.
We might.
We need to end on a positive note.
Yes.
Charlie and Erin, what are your favourite things about being on the double rainbow?
The colours. No, there's more people I can look at and think, oh, they're attractive. Oh yeah, that old joke about, oh, you're bi, that's you're twice as likely to get a date on a Saturday night then. How off the mark is that? Because most of us are autistic and struggle to get a date at all. It just makes it harder.
Exactly. I just want to, if I may, I just want to tell like a quick story, because I was at my local, I had a stall at my local Pride a couple of weeks ago, and I had my "Hello, I'm queer and autistic" banner up, and I had my books, and I was sat there like, "Hello, come and talk to me." And the amount of kids that came up to me and were like, "I am autistic and queer, yay!" and just really
lovely,
open and happy and like, yeah, this is who I am and I'm really proud of it, and I'm gonna talk to you because you know what it, you know, and I'd have these amazing conversations with these young people, and I'd sit there and be like, God, I'm so proud of you, and I wish I'd been this way when I was your age. And it just, oh, that's such an old woman thing to say, but
yeah, no, I'm on the same page. That fills my heart with joy as well.
Really claiming it. I'm like,
I went into the local youth club with my Iggy Rocks on Tuesday and Thursday last week actually, and yeah, it was all the same. They're painting their pride flags and telling me they're autistic and ADHD, and
I'm so proud of them.
With pride, not shame. And yeah,
I think we're heading in the right direction, and I think, you know, we've talked about a lot of heavy stuff, but I think the main thing about what I like about being under the double rainbow is it's hard sometimes, but I do genuinely enjoy being me, and like, this is who I am, and this is how my brain is, and this is what I am, and getting to a point of that has been a bit of a journey, but I do genuinely enjoy being who I am, and I think there's something very special about that. And I do think when you find other queer autistic people or other autistic people who have similar marginalizations to you, whatever they may be, that's a real, you can form like real tight friendships from that.
I see my daughters do that, and they both say, "Oh, we're built diff." Deal with it.
Yeah, and you know, it's something's. I think we're living in a really difficult time to be LGBTQIA+ right now, but something has definitely shifted with the younger generations, and it's going to be very hard to unshift that. Yeah. So
they're in charge.
Oh God, I'm just like, it's fine. I don't want to do this. But yeah, and I think if we keep fighting for that, because I think seeing young people younger than me not experience the same things I did is just that's what you should want as an older person. So I'm feeling positive in me and in young people today. So
fantastic.
I just like not having to be at war with myself all the time.
Oh God, yes. Yeah, absolutely. And the rainbows are lovely.
They are.
They're very, very good rainbows. It's like in terms of symbols, we've lucked out on that one, because it's a very nice one.
Yeah, well, as you might have noticed from the layout of the stream, I've got a bit of a thing for rainbows.
Me too, as you might notice from the office wall.
I was just thinking, well, I'm wearing one, so that'll do. And I do have some Disney ears somewhere. I can't find them, so.
Oh look, thanks to Bobby, I can fit even more rainbows on the screen now. And just a final comment that's come through before we wrap up. Anushka says that they have found from their teen children that young people are more accepting of difference. I think I have to agree with that.
Yeah.
I almost think of it as like a tectonic shift. You know how scientists talk about like the pressure builds up and builds up, then you. I feel like that's what's happening. Like maybe the younger generation is the earthquake. Maybe the pressure is built up enough that things are shifting finally.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that we recognise that without putting it all on them. I think that's really important that we go, oh, they've shifted, we've got to support them, because there's a lot of adults not supporting them, and that they need kind of us to have their backs. I think
Yeah.
that's
we
really
can't just rely on them to do the work.
not fair.
It would be, you know, we've got up to the finish line. It would be unfair for us to go, well, you can just cross the line now and we'll stay back here. Like, you know, we have to support them. Like,
completely.
And that means also accepting that sometimes they're going to have even more radical ideas than perhaps even we're comfortable with. Because with each new generation, ideas evolve. And I think the way we avoid getting trapped in the past is to kind of embrace the fact that newer generations are building the world they want to live in. Like,
and have conversations. We need cross-generational conversations. So important. And that's part of the reason why I think there's this big push to frame older queer and trans people as groomers, because actually that relationship between the cross-generational conversations that happen in communities like the queer community that pass on history and offer support and guidance are so important, and they don't want that because it's a threat, and it's why it's so important that we continue to obviously be safe about it and be aware that someone is younger and maybe more vulnerable, but that we have to keep fighting for those cross-generational kind of conversations to keep happening. Yeah,
we've got your back.
We've got you. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah,
we're the people going, you know, it's not, well, I had to go through this, so do you. It's, well, I had to go through this and I don't want you to go through it.
I want things to be better for you guys. Yeah, definitely.
That's us. So yeah, we will fight for you, and with you, not for you, actually. We will fight with you, and we will support you.
Well, the reinforcements.
Okay, well, it's been a really good live stream. Thank you, Charlie and Erin.
Thank you.
I don't know when the next aim for the Rainbow Live is, because we kind of just do them.
We should probably do an ADHD one, I guess, in October.
Yeah. I was just going to say, we're being very ADHD about it.
We'll get around to it.
However, people watching this, I think next, the 3rd of October, which is like, next Tuesday, a week tomorrow, I think. You can tune in on my page, and I'll be talking about neurodivergent mental health with Tanya Adkin and Katie Monday. So that will be a good conversation with this. So yeah, thank you everyone who's watched. Thank you, Charlie and Erin. For anyone interested, you can find the AIM website at rainbowaim.com, and we'll catch you in the next one.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming, guys. Thank you.
Bye.